and welcome. You're watching the special edition of Mega MNC on ET Now. I'm Anisha Jain, and today with me I have my guest joining in from Mastercard, of course, who's been playing a big role in the entire digitization of the Indian economy. Gautam Aggarwal from Mastercard joins us on the show now. Gautam, glad to have you here.
Thank you, Nisha. Glad to be on the show.
Thank you so much. Let's start by just that, right? India and digitization of the entire economy. I don't know whether we should kind of blame COVID for this or bless COVID for it and the government policies, mobile, internet, I don't know what, but a plethora of factors coming together, and as a result in the last 4 to 5 years, there has been this K-shaped recovery or K-shaped shift in the entire digitization angle.
I would say let all of them take the credit, right? What's happened in India is unique. If you go back in time, 2017, 2018 is when the government started with the what they call the JAM trilogy, Jan Dhan accounts, Aadhaar, mobility, all of that at play. And of course, technology was evolving with mobile becoming what it became. I think what's going on is the government did a really good job pre-COVID, I would say, where they really pushed digital inclusion as an agenda for the government, as a primary agenda for the government. And we've seen, of course, the benefits of that. Pretty much most adult Indians are banked today, which was not the case 5-6 years ago. And of course, everybody's using a mobile device. We have more internet users, we have more mobile users than anywhere else in the world, maybe with the exception of China. I think scale is what makes it different for India, that we have in India. And of course, I would say we'd like to take credit as a payment company ourselves that we have played a big role in this journey as well in the last many years. But this is a unique example of what a private-public partnership can do. In the last 5 years, with the government and the regulator taking the front seat on how payments should shape out in India, how digital interaction should shape out in India for that matter, we've seen the tremendous growth. So much so that I would say India has kind of become the poster child today, right? Between UPI, between what's going on with Aadhaar, digital locker, we have Digi now. So look around, Indians are interacting in digital fashion a lot more than anywhere else in the world anybody else is doing. So I think it's a win-win story. COVID, of course, played its part. I will not give too much credence to it. I think it helped people be pushed into using it, and it was sticky. People have stayed on with these technologies. That's important. I think private sector, public sector have all played a role for us to be where we are.
Yeah, and people have stuck around because it's very convenient, and you see the utility of that as well, right, in everyday life. But do you think, Gautam, this is largely limited to urban India, or is it turning out to be a lot more rural as well? If you have some data to kind of back it up in terms of what kind of digital penetration are we sitting at right now?
So I think rural India is about 37%, right? Urban India is about 37%. I would say this is a phenomena that is happening in the entire country. Now, keep in mind though, the access to quality technology, access to electricity, access to internet is still better in urban India than it is in rural India. And so while we made great strides on what's happening in urban India, there's still a lot of room for it to grow in urban India as well. Even today, I would say network connectivity in urban India is somewhat questionable, right? Even in a city like Mumbai. However, I think rural India is catching up. I think the one thing that was really good is technology companies that came about in India 5-10 years ago, innovating in India. They always talked about smartphones, and they talked about feature phones. They talked about text-based phones as well back in the day, right? So I think we created technology in India in a way where it was inclusive. It was created in a way that somebody in the cities could use it using an iPhone or an Android phone. Somebody with a lower cost phone with not the same features could use it in the villages. So while the adoption in the villages, I would say, is still behind urban India, I think the villages are catching up. The one area that we have to make sure that we don't forget though is electricity is very important, right? We still have lots of villages in India that are not fully got the benefit of electricity. So I think connectivity and electricity, as long as we can get it to urban India, there won't be any differentiation as far as digital adoption is concerned between urban and rural India. And we are also seeing it in our world. We use the word Bharat and India right now to differentiate between the two. We were a very India-focused organization for many years, right? That was how we operated as a business. But in the last 5 or 6 years, we are seeing that we have pivoted ourselves as well to focus on the other side of India as well. We are working with farmers today, MSMEs, women in rural India. So we are going into those places as well. And there are a lot of opportunities for growth for companies like us as well in those parts of the country.
But explain to me, when you're working with farmers, SMEs, small-time entrepreneurs, etc., what's the utility for them to kind of shift towards this entire digital payment ecosystem?
I think first I'll preface in saying it's not just about payments. I think what we are pivoting with in India is around the digital interactions. So we're shifting away from digital payments, digital transactions. That terminology is becoming more around digital interactions. So today, people are interacting in digital forms, and that's happening with farmers as well. So what we have done is, in the case of farmers, I'll just take that as an example first. We have a program called Farm Pass. It's a global program, actually. What that program is, it's basically nothing but a marketplace. It's a marketplace where buyers and suppliers can interact, can buy and sell things. And so in this case, farmers come and they can actually sell their produce. They can get the right price for their produce, and they can also buy input. So they can buy fertilizer, other chemicals, all of that. And we're already seeing it's a very young program in India for us. It's been around for less than 2 years. We have partnerships with companies like Basics and Leaf helping us out go in the rural areas. If I were to give you some numbers, I think we've already touched the lives of about 10 lakh farmers in India, and this is just about in 5 or 6 states of India, mostly the southern states. And we have got to around 200 crore rupees worth of transactions that have flown through the system. Now, when I talk about transaction, the natural reaction anybody will have, oh, that's payment. No. We are not playing in that just for the payment. Payment is an aspect of it. They may use a Mastercard, they may use a UPI, they may use something else, doesn't matter. The fact that we are able to bring them on board on this marketplace and interact and do commerce for them, and the fact that we've been able to flow 200 crores worth of commerce through that platform is what we are really focused on. If they end up using Mastercard, great. It's not something that we are forcing them to use. And our vision is now to take it to more farmers in the country. We'd like to double that number in the coming 18 to 24 months, and maybe quadruple that number in the next 5 years. We have, of course, extended to other states as well beyond the southern states. We're looking at Assam, Odisha, Telangana, Punjab, other places to extend this program.
Interesting. So that's one part of your area where you're extending. But I'm just coming back to the initial part of your answer where you were talking about UPI and a lot of these other fintechs also coming to the foray in the country. How big is the competition from them? Because earlier a part of the utility of credit cards, which of course is one of your stakeholders as well, is buy now pay later kind of scenario, right? You had the option of bringing in EMIs, etc. But a lot of marketplaces right now are offering it, and a lot of players themselves are vertically integrating themselves as well. How big a competition it is, and how are you looking at the entire landscape changing now?
Listen, we don't think of this as competition as much as coexistence. The reality is it's a really big canvas for everybody to play. The analogy I like to give is, think of modes of transportation. There is a bicycle, there is the ability for you to walk, there is a car, there is a bus, there is a plane, there is a train, there's space rockets today, right? They all serve the same purpose at the heart of it, going from point A to point B. Now, depending on what your use case is, you choose one versus the other. There was a time when bicycle was the only form of transportation other than walking, and cars came about, motorcycles came about, and certain use cases shifted to using cars and motorcycles or whatever. And bicycles still existed. In fact, in modern world, bicycles have found a new place for them, which is around health and whatnot. Trains, same story with trains. Today, if you want to go from Bombay to Pune, if I were to use speed of transportation as the only factor, then the logical answer would be to use a plane. Nobody really wants to take a plane ride from Bombay to Pune. It's better off driving or taking a train ride, right? Because 2 hours check-in, all of the hassle that you have there. So I think that's the way I look at payment systems, right? There will always be a need for various payment systems to exist. The way I look at them is there are really 3 kinds of payment flows, right? They are the pay now flows, where you need to have money with you to be able to transact, whether that money is in the form of cash or money sitting in your bank account that you can use using UPI or a debit card. So that's when you have the money, you pay for it, you buy something and you exchange that something for money. Then there is what I call pay later flows, which is the credit flow, where you actually pay using a credit card or some other form factor that is credit-like form factor, where you buy something, you actually pay for that item much later, right? And there is also something called pay before, which is traditional prepaid cards, wallets in the old form. So in my mind, this is not really competition, it's coexistence. This creates for consumer choice. People have a lot of choice to make where they pay. I think what's important is the use cases and whether they bring the right security around the payment. Because certain transactions, you would want certain kind of security around it, right? Especially the large value transactions where there is 2 parties are interacting with each other, where there is no trust between those 2 parties, right? So to me, I see it as an opportunity for the consumers to choose what they want to use and the right use case to be used for the right payment mode that's out there.
Is this the argument you'll also put in place for the entire interoperability norms that RBI is suggesting at this point of time, that the consumer will have the choice to choose between various partners when it comes to payments as well, Mastercard, Visa, RuPay, etc.?
So you're referring to the RBI circular that came out earlier in the year.
Proposal, at least at this
That's
stage.
right. So I think, see, in the spirit of the proposal, I won't comment too much on the proposal itself because it's not clear yet on what the underlying intent is. But if I look at the spirit of the proposal, it's creating for consumer choice. I think as an organization, we stand for consumer choice, right? We've always stood for it. That's in fact the reason we moved from being a card company only to being a payments technology company, right? Today we do real-time payments, we do cards, we do other forms of payments. So I think consumer choice is a good thing. It's a good thing for the ecosystem. The question to ask is how will it get implemented and what's the underlying request from RBI? I think that is what will differentiate. It's unclear right now where we'll land, but I think broadly, if choice is the underlying intent, I think it's a good thing for the ecosystem.
Yeah, consumer is king, so giving them the choice
Absolutely.
is the absolute, mantra as well. But you were talking about security being one of the important parameters, right? When you choose the different options, what are you doing in terms of leveraging, let's say, technology, artificial intelligence? Because you call yourself a, technology-first company. What are you doing in terms of making sure that cybersecurity is paramount for you as well?
So lots of things. If I were to sit here, probably we can spend an entire day talking about it. So I'm going to think about what are the things I'm going to tell you.
Sure.
So I think cyber is probably one of the most important pillars for Mastercard globally. In fact, if I know my numbers well, over in the last 2 years alone, we believe that we have probably prevented $30 billion worth of fraud globally.
$30
right?
billion
$30 billion worth of fraud globally,
Whoa.
right? In the last two years, maybe three. And that, of course, is an estimate because, when we've prevented, right? So we can't really pinpoint the exact scenarios. And we also believed in the last 1 year, we've probably identified about 120 or 130 million odd transactions globally again that could have been classified as potentially fraudulent transactions that could have happened, right? So the fact that we are able to get to those large numbers is because at the core, safety and security has been a very important pillar for Mastercard. Now, the words for that have evolved over time, but I would say safety and security is a word that we have used for the last many years. I've been at the company for 8, and I've seen them from when I've been there, at least. And for us, investing in payment frauds is a very important, natural thing to do. We have many assets in this space. We call them cyber and intelligence assets, C&I assets. We've bought companies that are focused on making sure payment transaction is secure. We score transactions based on patterns. So we look at when you spend on your card, we don't know who you are, but we know on that card what transactions have happened, right? So for me, a card is just a number, right? Based on that number, we know what kind of transactions that are happening on that number. And we're able to essentially create patterns, and we can see when there is a divergence from that pattern, right? And we can with a lot of confidence say whether something is potentially a fraudulent transaction or not, and the actual card user is doing that transaction or not, right? So in many cases, you may have, as an example, a dependent card. You may have a card for yourself and for your husband, as an example. And you may use one card in Mumbai, and your spouse may use that card somewhere else in the world. In the old days, probably that would be seen as a fraudulent transaction because the systems are not there to be able to have the right AI in place. Now with the right AI modules in place and the pattern recognition and the computing power that is there in place, we can always look at that transaction, see, we see a ticket was bought on that for you to go to, let's say, the US, and the transaction was done in the US. So chances are it's not a fraudulent transaction, it's a real transaction. So we've put a lot of controls in place. We're investing a lot in AI. In fact, we call this what we call as our non-payments business. And globally, from being a payments-only company many years ago, where 100% of our revenues were from payments, today, I think around about 60% of our revenues from payments, and 40% of our revenue actually globally is not from payments, right? Roughly, maybe it's 35 to 40. It's all of the stuff, cyber, data analytics. We're doing a lot of data analytics today. We are one of the largest loyalty companies out there in the world. We're providing loyalty services to, we're doing consulting services as well globally. A lot of that is new for us in India. We have not done a lot of that in India. So cyber and safety and security is something that we do in India aggressively as well. We have some presence in India on the data analytics side, but some of the consulting services and loyalty we've not brought to India yet, but that's what we're trying to do. And then of course, I'm sure you've heard of the word priceless. That's our asset. There's something called the priceless asset. We've just recently launched Priceless India, which takes it to a completely different place where we are actually trying to be an entity that provides you priceless experiences, right? And that's nothing to do with payments, that's nothing to do with cyber, so that's also something that we offer today.
Yeah, that's a curated experience that you don't get at other places. So that's definitely one place that I go to very often. But since we're talking about India in context of the global business as well, you've been in India for what, 4 decades now? As we move forward, what do you see in terms of the growth for India going forward? What kind of investments is the global parent making in India right now?
So, we committed back in 2013 or 14, we committed about $2 billion roughly over the next 10 years in India. And we are in our 10th, we are in the 9th or 10th year of that commitment. And I think I have not done the math, but if I were to actually do the accounting, I would probably suggest that we probably spend more money than we had committed. India is the place where all the innovation is happening, right? I would not just say India is, there are many countries, India is one of the many countries, but because India is large, because of the tech talent that we have, engineers and all of that in India, I think you can't ignore India, right? And so we have a lot of innovation that is going on in India today. And that's the continued investments we're going to continue making in India. We're doing a lot of product development. We're doing a lot of work around, again, AI stuff that I was talking about earlier. And my belief is, in fact, if I'm not mistaken, our second largest employee base today globally is in India, after the US. And that number will probably only increase. So there is a lot of investment we are making in India. And of course, we can't make those investments without being part of the community, right? So as we are making these investments and we have people in the various cities, Delhi, Bombay, Pune, Hyderabad, Gurgaon now, we are of course making sure that we are also having an impact on those communities, right? We are going to the right schools in these places. Pune has a lot of engineering talent, as you're aware, and we're hiring people from those schools. We are part of skill building efforts that are happening in the local communities. When the Prime Minister announced Skill India initiative, that was something that really got us excited. So while we are, of course, investing in India for Mastercard's own business interests, right? You can't do it without being part of the community, right? And so we are doing that extensively in India.
Okay, on that note, we'll slip into a very short break, but don't go anywhere. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation with Gautam. Welcome back. As promised, we're still in conversation with Gautam, trying to pick his brain as to where we are in the digitization of the country, and more interestingly, what's Mastercard doing about it. So we were just discussing India in context of how it's important for the global parent as well. I do understand it's one of the focus areas as well for the parent. So talk to me about in terms of what are you doing differently here? What's the plan for India going forward?
Yeah, sure. So I think, as I already mentioned, it's the country where we have the second largest employee base and possibly the largest fairly soon. I'll tell you, I have worked with Mastercard for 9 years. So I was sent here from the global team to actually focus on India because it is a very important market for the company. We are very focused on what's going on. Because it is a market that represents 20% of the world's population, right? It is a market where a lot of innovation is happening. It is a market where a lot of competition is also happening, coexistence, as we talked about earlier.
Innovation in digital.
Fantastic innovation. I already said, it is almost in many ways, India is writing the playbook, if I were to say that, for what digital can be for a country, right? How it can actually create inclusion and move forward the agenda of growth for the country. So I think it is, if I were to sum it up, it's probably one of the most important, maybe the top 2 most important markets that we as an entity are focused on looking forward. And it's not the largest, we still have other economies that are bigger than us, but I think we're very focused on India. And I think a best testament to that is our global CEO has been in India since I've taken this role now 2 times over already in this past year. He was there last year as well, so 3 times since he's taken over. And I expect him to be in India again, maybe twice next year as well. So it is clearly a focus market for us.
Looking forward to meeting with him as well.
Absolutely.
When he comes down, and I'm sure he's keeping you on your toes about the focus that is there in India. So there's a lot of focus on you as well. True that. But just coming back to the point in terms of India and how the consumer trends are evolving as well. Give me some insight, because you are, of course, have tapped into a lot of data and analytics. So tell me what the insight is.
So let me tell you a little bit. Firstly, let's talk about how consumers are spending.
Sure.
I think what we are seeing is because of the growth that India is seeing. Back in the day when we were kids, holidays meant going to, extended family, the grandparents' house, nana nani's house, or whatever, right? Family vacations were that, and it was like large families, and eating was inside the house. You didn't really go out much to eat, and it was not very expensive holidays, and there weren't really any experiences. It was just hanging out with the family. I think the change that we've seen is now the consumer spending is more around experiential spending, adventure spending, of course, and I'm probably overgeneralizing. Of course, there are certain categories of consumers that are still spending the way we used to spend in the past, but we are seeing a lot of, discretionary spend is there, but a lot of non-discretionary spend is happening, right? Dining, retail, huge spends, right? People going outside of the country. We are seeing a lot more consumers going out of the country and spending there, and they're using digital form factors to pay. Electronics, is something that used to be something used to import, right? Smuggle at times in the past, right? But now people are buying it all here, right? It's all available here, right? Yeah. Back in the day, people used to buy something that was expensive, and they would see that will work for 10, 20, 30 years. That's not what people are looking for. People are looking for something that will last 2-3 years and buy the new stuff, right? iPhone, right? People want the new iPhone every 2 years, right? Even though it's one of the most expensive phones out there in the markets. So I think we are seeing a shift in how consumers are behaving and buying, right? The other big thing we are seeing is because of digitization, and because of regulatory support as well, we're seeing consumers are getting more educated on the safety around payment, right? We are seeing that consumers feel more safe when they pay for a larger ticket transaction using a contactless form factor, right? In fact, we have used the recent World Cup as a way to promote more of that, and the regulator is also promoting, right? Enabling all cards to be contactless cards, enabling all terminals to be contactless terminals is something that the RBI is pushing for, and I think that's a great thing. And again, almost setting the playbook again for the world, right? What it should look like. And then, of course, because of those changes, the consumers are getting comfortable with that, right? In fact, so much so the other day, my wife was using our card and she said, "Oh, I tried to tap the card and it didn't work." I said, because, it was a new credit card. I said, because I had just disabled contactless to see, whether the feature really works or not, right? And it works really well. So I do think, the behavior has changed. And of course, the other big thing is holidays and experiences that people are doing are more nuclear now. Right? So we are seeing a lot more frequent transactions, high value transactions, but a lot more frequent.
Interesting. And this is something I've been hearing from a lot of other corporates as well, the rise of affluent India and how luxury spends or discretionary spend is which is picking up. And back home, I can see my father, who was completely against all of these online transactions, finally becoming a follower. He has all those digital apps now and the credit cards and debit cards, which he never used to use. So yes, I think that education is something, and the safety is something which is now coming up and giving them the confidence as well. But you touched upon World Cup, and that gets me to the partnership that you have with, this ICC World Cup, which is underway. We are all here rooting for India, and I'm
Absolutely.
sure you are as well.
Absolutely.
But tell me, apart from your love for cricket, what else was the thought process here?
See, the reality is, when you want to create brand affinity in a market like India, you have to see what touches the chord of the Indian, the average Indian. There's politics that people love to talk about. There's Bollywood. And there's cricket. Now, the problem is, when you look at these three things, where is an area one can have very focused marketing branding initiatives? Politics is hard to do. We wouldn't want to do it. Bollywood is very hard to do as well, because they have very small events, right? We can't go produce a movie and say we are part of Bollywood. So the natural instinct for us was to go do something in cricket. We've actually tested the waters in cricket many years ago. We were in the IPL in some form with the Mumbai Indians many years ago. So we had some success with cricket. But more importantly, as a global brand, we are a sponsor of many events globally, right? We had the BAFTAs, we had the UEFA, we had the Grammys. So we have very good experience in running global sponsorships. The Australian Open is another one that we own as an asset. So having had that experience and seeing the love for cricket that exists in India, it was a bit of a natural choice for us to go do something in cricket in a more bigger way. We retested the waters for the first time after many years last year when we took the BCCI home series sponsorship for about 8-9 months, and we felt we got what we wanted from that sponsorship. There were a lot of lessons we learned. There were things that we could have done differently, and given that, we thought, why not the World Cup, right? In India, since it was happening in India after 12 years now, and it's been 12 years since we actually won the World Cup. It was 2011. So it just made natural sense. And, the way the team is going, we feel really good that we did that. We are rooting for the country. But more importantly, I think it was very clear that if we were to do cricket in India this time around, the kind of brand affinity that we are trying to get into in India, especially now that, we talked about consumer choice earlier, choice to get consumers to, like you'll have to create experiences for the consumers. So we want to use cricket as a platform, merge it with Priceless, as we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
So what we are doing at cricket now is, I don't know if you've seen the games, we actually have a Mastercard box,
yeah.
right? Which is unique to us. No other sponsor has that. In that box, we have 8 to 12 chairs, I think, per game. I don't know the exact number, but in that vicinity. And we are running campaigns with our partners, both on the merchant and bank side. And whoever is the winner of those campaigns, gets to experience the game from those boxes. You have food, you have drinks in those boxes. And I'm told those are the best seats at the stadium.
But it was great having you, Gautam, in the studio. Thank you so much for joining us. And hopefully I'll see you if we do get those tickets to the finals.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Okay, with that, it's a wrap on this conversation. Thanks so much for being with us.